Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The shifting alliances across the Middle East due to regional events have produced partnerships based on strategic interests, which some may classify as surprising. Such a new triangle has been formed between Jerusalem, Athens, and Nikosia. To discuss this growing relations, we're joined here in the studio by Mr. Amir Oren, who is the Director General of the Gas and Oil Industries Association in Israel. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren, and Dr. Eran Lerman, who is the Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and a lecturer at Shalem College. Welcome. Mr. Oren, give us a broader understanding of this specific topic.
You may indeed call it EMP, not electromagnetic pulse, but Eastern Mediterranean partnership between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. And obviously, they all have a common adversary, Turkey, which used traditionally to be allied with Israel because they both had a common enemy, Syria. But under President Erdogan, of course, their relations have grown cold and sometimes hostile. So Greece, Cyprus, and Israel are, in a way, against Turkey. They have common military interests, but they also have a common economic interest, namely gas, which Amir is much more proficient in talking about. And one may also add to this triangle two other partners, Egypt and perhaps the United States.
Dr. Lerman, I'd like to ask you the following question. As you've been following this partnership and the evolving elements surrounding this topic, as well as having a special day specifically talking about this growing alliance at your Institute for Strategy and Security, to what degree is this a significant milestone in the regional developing events?
I think it is actually a very impressive and I believe something that will persist down the road. It is not, as some people assume, simply contingent on the Turkish situation or the politics of Erdogan. I would say it has three E's shoring it up. Erdogan, certainly, energy, and Egypt. If you look at the moment in which Israel and Greece and Cyprus come together, it is in response to what happened in Egypt in 2013. Most countries in Europe were uneasy, to put it mildly, about the overthrow or the removal from power of the Muslim Brotherhood and Mohammed Morsi. But the countries nearer to the event, Greece and Cyprus, and of course Israel, and actually also, by the way, the Palestinian Authority and others in the region, were elated to see the Muslim Brotherhood, a very dangerous and sophisticated enemy, removed from power. Of course, Turkey was livid because Erdogan looks upon the Brotherhood as basically his allies, his friends. I would say that he turned AK party into some kind of Muslim cousins, if not brothers. But all of this has brought Israel, Cyprus, and Greece much closer together. It's a remarkable partnership because politically, Anastasiades and Tsipras could not have come from more remote corners of the European political spectrum.
Right and left, absolutely.
Right and left, hard left, I would say, about Tsipras and Syriza. And there were and Syriza, when they came to power, the assumption was that relations with Israel may be undermined because of their traditional positions, and exactly the opposite happened. So this is obviously being driven by very powerful common interests.
And one of those powers is, of course, the financial element to this. Mr. Foster, when we're talking about the vast discovery of the Leviathan and the other smaller discoveries within the Mediterranean Sea between Israel and Cyprus, there has been a growing interest of establishing a pipeline from Israel through Cyprus, Greece, Italy, and further on, something that, of course, has a lot of dimensions to it, creating somewhat of leverage of the European Union vis-a-vis Russia as well. But give us a little bit of an understanding to what degree has this relation actually evolved to something significant?
Okay, so first of all, about the pipeline to Europe, it's something that is under study now from a technical and from economical point of views, because it's really, really difficult pipeline to be built, and we don't know yet what is the economic situation with this pipeline. But it's really important for all those countries, and of course for Israel, to check and study for that. Another country which is really important when we look about the East Mediterranean is, of course, Egypt. And I think that the current president, Al-Sisi, I think he actually saved Egypt, not less than that. Save Egypt from economic point of view and from energetical point of view. The place that they've been a few years ago was terrible for them. And today, a lot of companies in the world want to work in Egypt. All the energy world, natural gas particularly, look about our region, and we all together trying to figure out how to find more energy in this area and how to export this energy from this area.
Of course, the findings of the Egyptian reservoirs have had also a significant point in the findings that we had in the Leviathan and the different geological aspects and the scraping and identifying of where it might be located. But also another significant step that was done was to establish a more than $15 billion agreement between Israel and Egypt on the transfer of gas, something that is also quite significant, not only for Egypt, but also for Israel.
Yeah. Again, Assisi said that he wants that all the surplus of gas in the region will go through Egypt, first for domestic use, and the domestic use in Egypt is huge. It's a 100 million people country that need much more energy in development mode now, so they need a lot of energy. And then they have 2 liquefaction plants, huge ones, that they can export gas from Egypt. And what I understand, that if it will be much more gas in the area, they will build another liquefaction plant. So it's, from geopolitical point of view, it's really strategic for Egypt. And I think if we look about Turkey and Egypt, they actually won till now the battle about the regional hub. Turkey wants to be regional hub too. But what happened when Assisi came to control? It took the energy up, I think, from Turkey, because...
Well, I'd like to resume focus towards the triangular partnership between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus on the matter of this. But before we continue to that direction, Mr. Oren, economic development, different significant energy deals are usually linked also with security stability, something that Egypt has not been too successful of preserving, at least on the public relations point of view. To what degree is this a significant challenge for Egypt at a time when it has significant aspirations on the matter?
One should look at the Eastern Mediterranean as a whole region with some common problems, common threats, and therefore some common answers. If you look at the geography involved, obviously Cyprus is an island, and therefore it is surrounded with waters in which it has a lot of interest. North of it, of course, you have Turkey, and you have the Turkish occupied part of Cyprus. And by the way, if you happen to be in Athens, only a few blocks away from Parliament, you have the military museum, which would show you, first of all, how the Greeks fought the communist invasion in the late 40s, and how the Cypriots fought for independence from Britain and for enosis with Greece. Now, when the 45 years ago, in 1974, when the Cypriot National Guard launched a coup and then tried to unify Cyprus with Greece, we had the Turkish invasion. At that time, Israel in Washington, on Capitol Hill, was festered by the Turks to help and balance the power of the Greek lobby. There were many Greek senators and congressmen in key positions, and they acted against Turkey. Turkey, behind the scenes, used Israel to help it. Now, of course, it's the other way around. What we have here now in the Mediterranean is the Russian entrenchment in Syria along the coast at Latakia and Khmeimim air base, which is quite near the coast. And obviously, Hezbollah in Lebanon is challenging Israel also in the water because Israel, Cyprus, and Lebanon have demarcation problems regarding the gas reservoirs. So this could become a flashpoint, but I would like to remind you, there is a sovereign British territory on Cyprus, actually two territories, Akrotiri and Dhekelia, and Cyprus is not a NATO member because of Turkish opposition. It is a European Union member. And the British and the Americans who have an agreement with the British use Akrotiri for signals intelligence, for Air Force operations. Cyprus is an important base. Israel has trained in Cyprus and with the Cypriots, as well as in Greece and with the Greek Air Force. It is a very valuable asset for the Israeli Defense Forces to be able to train with the Greeks and the Cypriots.
Well, Dr. Lerman, when we're talking about the conference that you had early last month, you discussed also with different Greek officials and people from all three.
Former foreign minister of Cyprus spoke very eloquently.
Correct.
Yes.
You had all kind of people come and show the significance of this relationship, the fact that a foreign minister of a country comes and wants to participate in such a conference shows more than just an initiative, but a true partnership with Israel on so many levels. But at the same time, we had also a meeting just late last month on the 20th of December.
The cyber capital of the world.
Correct. In Beersheba. To what degree is this relation actually growing to the point that Turkey views this as a challenge for its own national security and economic interests?
Well, Turkey certainly looks upon anything and everything that Greece does with a degree of very old enmity. Erdogan has been openly talking about revising the Lausanne Treaty, the borders in the Aegean, in the presence of the Greek president, who basically had to overcome his embarrassment at such a situation. About the relationship between Turkey and Cyprus could not get worse anyway. It is it involves Turkish threats to the ability of the Cypriots to use their own EEZ and so on. And of course, Israeli-Turkish relationship having been slightly patched up after the payment of compensation and over the Mavi Marmara situation, have again deteriorated over the situation in Gaza, as one could have expected. So Turkey is an active promoter of causes which are threatening to all three countries. And that's the reason why by now, and I should add, it also treats Sisi's government in Egypt with a degree of open hostility. They almost cut off relations after Morsi was removed. And Erdogan basically...
Due to the factor which you mentioned earlier with regard to the Muslim Brotherhood.
The affinity between Erdogan and Morsi. And what this has led to is the emergence not just of this one, this is not the first trilateral summit. In Beersheba, it was the fifth between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. And a month before, it was the sixth summit, tripartite summit, in the same model between Tsipras, Anastasiades, and Sisi. The interesting new element is that the tripartites have now produced standing secretariats. So this is going beyond mutual conversations. This is by now institutionalized. And both are sitting in Nicosia. So you have an Israeli Greek Cypriot and an Egyptian Greek Cypriot secretariat sitting next to each other in communication with each other. This is exactly what the professionals sometimes call the building blocks of a new security architecture in the Eastern Mediterranean. Down the road, it's also Jordan, and it should be and can be Italy, which is what made Matteo Salvini's visit in Israel, with all the controversy around it, so very important. So we can look at something like the 5+5 in the Western Mediterranean. We can look at the 3+3 in the Eastern Mediterranean. Italy, Greece, and Cyprus, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt, all working in a like-minded fashion for similar purposes.
Well, before I move on to the economic dimensions of this relationship further, I'd like also to touch on another actor, the Russians. Dr. Lerman, when we're talking about the Russians, they also vied for a contract of development for the Leviathan and the Tamar, and they had...
Not very aggressively.
Not very aggressively, because they were aware of the American influence over the area, but...
Gazprom did not... I was still in government back then when Leviathan was up for negotiation. Gazprom didn't push too hard, I have to say. It's very interesting. But at the end of the day, they don't see... I don't think they see a threat there. People sometimes assume that the Russians would be very aggressive in trying to foil a gas competition with their own marketing capabilities in Europe. I don't think they see it that way. I think they see Europe that is increasingly dependent on gas for consumption as being a mutual, a win-win. For we are not that big that the bear should worry about the Nord Stream and others.
But that's exactly the point. Because the Trump administration has come out against Nord Stream 2, and for energy security, and while the president himself may have other personal views, the administration has come out as a competitor to Russia and has warned Europe not to be dependent on Nord Stream. So they would see any other pipeline as a blessing.
But I should add one more thing. Historically, the Russians looked upon Greece and Cyprus as maybe even because of the religious dimension. And
favorably.
Putin has found
Absolutely.
him, I don't know how the KGB ever tolerated such a devout Pravoslav Christian in their ranks, but nowadays, of course, he has rebuilt the Kham in Moscow. Greece and Cyprus are historically oriented, and Cyprus had a good relationship with Russia. I know that the Russians look favorably upon closer Israeli-Greek Cypriot cooperation.
I don't think that the Russians today see what's happened here as a threat, but they are looking very close, and I think that they will, in the future, they will try to be involved in Egypt, in Israel, in Lebanon. They are already involved in Lebanon, and maybe in Cyprus. The area is really interesting to them because Europe is a source for a lot of income from the gas to Russia. So
Absolutely.
they look for 20, 30 years to the future.
Talking about the Russians in Lebanon, actually, the Lebanese have proposed several tenders, published them, something to the dismay of Israel at the time, which threatened with concrete repercussions. Nevertheless, Russia, France, and Italy have vied for those tenders with quite more resolve than what we hear about Israel. So to what degree is that actually a challenge?
Well, it's the whole dispute is about a certain small corner of what
Three segments.
of what you can measure, and the question is, how do you measure it? From which side of the coast, and what's the direct line? Is it? We shouldn't get into technicalities. The main question here seems to be the Russian-Turkish relationship, because Russia was for Greece as long as Turkey, as part of NATO, was anti-Russia. But now the game has changed after the Syrian civil war. And if we are going to see a Russian-Iranian-Turkish alliance, a raid against the forces which we have listed here, along with the United States, then it's a whole new ballgame.
And energy relations between Turkey and Russia are really, really good, and there is actually Turkey dependent on Russia from energy perspective, and Russia have a lot of income from Turkey, so they have.
Of course, they have also the agreement on the
Going
nuclear
back to-
development, but
going back
Dr.
to
Lerman?
Lebanon, I want to sound a bit like a devil's advocate or the Lebanese advocate for a minute. I think that Israel's first interest is for the Lebanese to have an actual stake in production in their blocks in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I would be even happier if they actually find something, because the big sisters and others do not come to conflict areas. This would create a vested interest for Lebanon to avoid turning the Eastern Mediterranean into a confrontation zone with Israel. So whatever they dig under our border at sea, they would have, this is Lebanon. War is war and business is business. And since the...
Nevertheless, prosperity equals stalemate in warfare?
Well, in the case of Lebanon, the stalemate is a political one. Lebanon is beyond, this is beyond corruption. This is systemic. The question is who gets the nice cuts from this. And since in Lebanon today there's no real political consensus between the various elements, not only the confessional groups, but the political power centers, Amal and Hezbollah and the Christians and the Sunnis, and since they cannot settle on a government and they cannot settle on who gets the cut from the profits of the gas, the whole thing is stuck. We could have resolved this around the table in half a day of serious conversations. It's still stuck.
Just to expand on what Eran said, it's very beneficial for Israel, for its adversaries and other neighbors to have a lot to lose from confrontation. Hezbollah has put the Israeli gas assets in its crosshairs. It has threatened publicly in the next conflict to hit the gas derricks and other assets. And if Lebanon too has something to lose from such a tit for tat, it's better for everyone.
Mr. Foster.
And it's almost similar to the story with the Gaza Marine. Who is got the cat from? Will get the money from Gaza Marine. Fatah, Hamas.
I think, Mr. Oren, would you elaborate on this specific finding off the coast of Gaza, which obviously nobody decided to develop due to security concerns, but there is a lot to know about this place?
Well, if you ask people who are more expert in geology, they're a bit skeptical. And some of those who were involved in the initial findings, which turned out to be held by Israeli companies and others, they say that whatever there was to find in the Eastern Mediterranean offshore has been found, and this is just a fantasy. But I would defer to experts on this.
Mr. Foster?
About Gaza Marine, they already found there about 35 BCM of gas. Of course, if they will
Extract.
Want to extract, they will need to do some more check about that. But no one doing it,
For
Because-
understood reasons of security, considering that an internationally recognized terror group controls this enclave. Dr. Lerman, when we're talking about the future of relations between Greece, Israel, and Cyprus, obviously there are military dimensions to this. Do you believe that this alliance will broaden to other partners in the region who, as you already mentioned, Italy and Egypt showing certain significant interest in becoming the hub of export to the world through different corridors? Where's this going?
Well, if it is true, as has been reported recently, that the Americans have finally woken up to the potential of this alliance, and they will join in a quadripartite military exercise, and that they are no longer just treating the Eastern Mediterranean, as I used to say, as an SLOC, as a sea lane of communications, but are beginning to see here a community of nations with common interests. They could be very instrumental in bringing together the various players into a more stable regional framework that could be open to Turkey towards the future. The point is not to create an exclusive club, but to create a like-minded club. And I think former Foreign Minister of Cyprus put it in our conference very clearly. We need to be a community of like-minded nations. If Turkey changes course from its present neo-Ottoman fantasies and back to a like-minded position, it will certainly find its place in an Eastern Mediterranean community of
Closing statement, Mr. Oren?
Cyprus to Israel is like Cuba to Miami. And you mentioned the term hub. Israel is not a hub in the traditional sense because it's a terminus. This is where planes land, but they don't take off elsewhere. Cyprus could be, and there was an idea which was put up recently for Cyprus to also be the harbor and therefore a hub for Gaza under different management.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today, so I'd like to thank Mr. Amir Foster, Mr. Amir Oren, Dr. Eran Lerman as well for coming here today. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.